Oh, hello. Welcome to another episode of Vito X Dino. This is episode 34. My name is Vito Delsante. His name is Dean Haspiel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dean Haspiel.
It's the Vito X, and that's the Dino part.
That's right, baby.
Today is my 16th wedding anniversary.
Whoa.
I've been
Whoa.
married. I can't believe anybody. First of all, before I got together with my wife, for those who are not privy to my personal life, which is probably a bunch of you, I met my wife in high school. I was 15. She was 13 going on 14. It was the same year that my dad died. It's a very formative year for me. My wife and I were friends throughout high school, even though we dated for like a minute, right before my father died. I went to a wedding reception with her. That was our first date. We held hands and everything. And after my dad died, everything kind of just like I'm sure my brain was nowhere, fit to be in a relationship with anybody. But we remained friends. We ended up going to the same high school at some point. My senior year, her junior year, our schools combined. So we actually had a class together, and we sat next to each other. We were, she was dating somebody, et cetera, and like, so we were friends, throughout. And 19 years later, we got back together, and we've been together ever since 2007.
I mean, high school sweetheart. That's how,
Yeah.
Denny O'Neil. So when I first met Larry O'Neil,
Mhm.
a good pal in high school, he was living with his mother and her then either boyfriend or husband. But it wasn't Denny O'Neil. It was a guy named Nat, who's really cool.
Uh-huh.
And so I would hang out with, Larry, and his mom would be there once in a while.
This is my
And
honey for 16
oh,
years.
there she is. Hey,
Thank you.
happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Look how smile. Look
Can you
at her
believe it?
smile. Look how
I know.
happy.
Even through the blur, it's a little blurry.
Move a little
You,
closer. You can't see.
there we go. You gotta get a little closer in
There
there.
we go.
There's the smile. There it is. Happy anniversary. And it's more than 16 years. It's like 50.
We met in 1988.
Yeah. I mean, come on already.
Yeah, 1988 we met, and then got together in 2007. Had our first kid in 2013, second kid 2015. So, I mean, that's a pretty full 16 years.
We actually got together in 96.
That's a hey-o.
Damn.
That's not
Well, I was gonna say in terms of high school sweethearts. So, and then Denny, I don't know if he dated anybody for a while or not. I wasn't privy to that, But at some point, he reignited a torch with an old flame from like maybe high school.
Yeah.
And was with Mary Fran, his wife of his latter years, until he passed away. And I think she passed away first, but I can't remember.
Wow.
Anyway, that seems to be a thing. Actually, my ex-girlfriend, Sarah Butterworth,
Yes.
went back to her old flame in England.
How about that? So, here's to love, everybody.
Yay. What does it say? As I said, I was right all along. As I suspected, I was right all along. Who gave you that cup?
I bought it for myself.
Oh. That's pretty good.
So yeah, happy anniversary to Michelle. Thank you very much for putting up with my weekly obsession of talking to Dean. Who might that be at my door? Hello.
They can't give you an hour or 90 minutes.
I'm a kid that was born in 2013, and I am alive.
Wow, 2013? And is that a wig?
No, that's her haircut. She just got her haircut.
Let me see. It's all blurry.
This is my theme song.
Oh wait, and wait a second. Who is that, Mario or the other one?
That's James.
No, I know, but he looks like
he's got Mario pajamas on.
Mario pajamas on.
Get a load of this guy. He was born in the 2015.
Oh Lord.
All right, guys.
Barely speak English to us.
All right, Scoot. Close the door. All right. Anyway.
All right.
I did want to bring up a topic before we get into some fun stuff. And that was the amazing courage of the women yesterday having their press conference and their meeting in Congress. These were the women that were abused by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and many other powerful people, I'm sure. And their announcement that they were going to compile their own list and release that list. And shout out to, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, shout out to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who seemed to be agreed to read that list on the floor of Congress. I don't agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene, but if she does pull that through, I commend her. You know, like
Was she the one? I don't follow a lot of this kind of stuff because it's just so much and
yeah,
it's overwhelming. But was she the woman who walked out and looked like she like had seen?
that was Nancy Mace. She's
Who
another
was that?
Republican congresswoman from, I want to say Indiana. I forget, but Nancy Mace is typically on Trump's dick. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, but she seemed to be very moved by the testimony and the not testimony, but the meeting with the women. So again, if this means something, you know, if this gets somewhere, great. But more importantly, you know, you're going to see a lot of people discrediting these women over the next few weeks, over the next few months. And I think it's important that we just listen and believe them. Um,
Mm.
the one on one hand, Jeffrey Epstein's not alive to defend himself, so I'm sure they're going to bring that up as a talking point. On the other hand, Ghislaine Maxwell just testified under oath that nothing untoward happened. Again, people are going to be attacking these women and their character for some time now, so it's important that we stand behind them and we listen and we believe them and we, number one, always just credit them for their strength in trauma,
No,
and
absolutely. And I guess, one could say, and again, I haven't really been following this, but I know a little bit of it. Like there was a headline on my New York One News last night about it. And, in general, it is so tough. It
yeah,
is so tough to be like, accuse somebody. I don't know what kind of evidence they have or don't have. But let's just say it's just word of, it's just you have to believe someone.
right,
And then you have to think, well, why would they, and it's like, oh, money, shut up, money, or, they don't like someone or they're crazy. That happens too, but I have a good feeling that they're probably telling the truth because what is there to gain? And also because honestly, and this is my cynical point of view of America right now, even if you had a videotape of them doing whatever, and I don't mean just having sex because people can have sex, I don't
right,
care. But let's just say there was something illegal or criminal. My cynical point of view is that half America doesn't give a shit anyway.
right.
They don't care. Like, I don't know what these people have to do where ultimately they'll be like, nah, get
You
out,
know,
cut it out, you know?
I just want their voices to be heard and I want their voices to be
Yeah.
validated. That's all. You
Yeah. No,
know,
I feel you. I feel you, man.
but let's move on to happier things. Obviously, this is something that we don't usually talk about, and we will, keep an ear on it and stuff. Um, it's tough. Like dealing with, everything that we deal with here in America, which brings me to my segue. Um, it's tough to kind of justify being an American sometimes. However, we were just mentioned on a podcast based out of New Zealand. Tell them about him, D.
So I think you got the same message I got this morning, which was quite sweet, which was uh, Gary Challoner and Tim McEwen have a podcast called Club Domingo, which I was not aware of. But then again, there are a billion podcasts just like ours, so most people aren't aware of ours either. And but it seems to be done in the same spirit, but New Zealand style, which
Yeah.
is two guys having a conversation, guerrilla style,
Mm.
And in episode 26, they did a real nice thing and talked about us and our podcast for about 6 minutes. I haven't listened to the entire podcast yet, so I don't know if they return and talk to us for another hour, about us. But even what they said was just super nice and sweet. And I feel like a certain brotherhood, across the pond, as it were,
Yeah.
with these guys. And you've actually parlayed a little bit with Gary
Yeah, I've
Shaw,
known
have you?
Gary for years. I call him Gaz. That's just the nickname that we were introduced. Gaz and I have known each other for years. Around the time that he was doing the Will Eisner John Law
Hmm.
book, he and I started talking. I think because at some point I had this, and you know about this. I have this property called the Mercury Chronicles, which is a golden age story, superhero, not superhero, but like a guy kind of caught up with aliens and stuff. And I really wanted a kind of Will Eisner-esque type of art. And Gaz, man, he just nails it,
Yeah.
and I think that's what started our conversation very early on. And and since we started our podcast, he's been a diehard listener. So
Oh, he mentioned that he listens to every episode, and then he also
yeah.
mentioned, which I thought was cool, is that sometimes we'll bring up a topic. He's like, "That's exactly what I was thinking," or "That's what I was going to talk about in the next,
Yeah,
episode,"
yeah.
with his buddy Tim. And I believe they're both cartoonists, or
Yes.
at least they both draw. And it was just very sweet to get that kind of like little bit of love,
You
you
know,
know.
what I like too is that, like I said, you said it was episode 26. So
Yeah,
their show is very young, just like ours. We're at 34, we're just a couple of maybe ahead. But what I like is that there's this Ink Slingers as well is another one that I think of. Um, the one with Andy Belanger, I can't remember the name of his, but these two-man operations, kind of like we're all like distant cousins of cartoonist kayfabe, and like we've popped up, and I think that's great. I mean, I don't think any of us are copying the format, that
not
they
at all.
Jim
I mean,
and
we're not like, I know Nicholas Forker does. I think it's called Comic Book People or Comics People, and he does one with a buddy. And once in a while, they have had a guest, but they basically there's a little bit of a kayfabe format, and where we haven't done the thing where you take a camera and position it over a comic book and turn
right,
pages type
right.
thing. Like
We came close. Bob Fingerman on the chest faced episode had his camera
that's
and
right,
focused on that for a little while we
that's
were
right.
talking and stuff. But
And and then there's Jim Mahfood and Sean Crystal have
yes,
Ink Pulp. So
ink
there's a
pulp.
lot. I
I said
mean,
ink slingers, ink pulp. I'm sorry.
right, Ink Pulp. So I'm gonna say ultimately, and we've done other podcasts that we've been on that people have recognized our podcast and us as a duo, which is funny, because I did Trip City podcast
Yeah,
in 2011 with Chris Miskevich, who I just had dinner with. Hi, Chris. We're gonna have on the show at some point soon,
yeah.
and Seth Kushner and Jeffrey Burant. And I remember drawing in my part of the studio while Jeffrey Burant brought in this guy named Charles Soule to talk
Mm,
to him. He was a
yeah,
lawyer who had been writing about 7 different books a month in comics. And I'm
yeah.
like, how is he doing? Who the hell is this guy? So yeah, we were doing podcasting, probably on the heels of Mark Maron, because Mark Maron kind of showed us a certain way where you could, yeah, with certain production values, fine, we don't have that,
Right,
but just to have that conversation and to not be in interview mode necessarily,
right.
and then us just talking because that's what we do anyway,
Well,
you
yeah,
know.
it's the casual nature of it, where, like I said, I don't think any of the ones that you mentioned, Ink Pulp, Club Domingo, any of them, I don't think they have like the kind of format that cartoonist kayfabe had, which is great. I love that you
Right.
can still watch cartoonist kayfabe videos on YouTube and still get it's still fresh. You know what I
It's
mean?
an abundance. They have an abundance. I mean, there's also I don't know if we mentioned this last episode, but Tommy Lombardozzi and Mike D
Yes,
just published their 300th
300.
episode of the Jacked Kirby podcast featuring in episode 300 Walt Simonson.
Yeah,
Like,
perfect
and
guest.
they've had a lot of great guests, but they're also really good when the two of them are just talking about Jack Kirby comics.
Yeah, just like
So
us.
exactly,
uh,
exactly.
so just a couple of quick hits. Giorgio Armani passed away at the age of 91. He just turned 91, I believe, on Sunday or Saturday, which is crazy. Imagine, having your birthday and then, but then again, you know,
that's just like dating your high school flame. It's the same thing. But a lot of people die around their birthday. It's almost
Yeah.
like they get to it and they're like, okay,
Yeah.
I
It's like
got
an
I got to
exhale.
that number. Whitney Matheson, my studio mate, writes for AARP, and one of the things she writes is who just turned 50 or who just turned whatever, on the one page in the back of the magazine. And she was, I think, today writing about Dick Van Dyke, who will, if he lives long enough, he will be 100
Yeah.
soon,
Yeah.
which is amazing,
Yeah.
So, uh, Giorgio Armani, was there any other little
Yeah, the
news
only other
bits?
thing I wanted to mention just very quickly was 2027, mark your calendars, July of 2027, Man of Tomorrow by James Gunn, which will star Nicholas Hoult and co-star David Cornsweet, apparently. Like, this isn't a Superman movie. That's why it's not called Superman Man of Tomorrow, but it seems like it's going to be a Lex-centric movie just based on, what I've seen, and based on like casting, where they said Corn Sweat's going to be Superman, but this isn't a Superman movie. This is like in the Superman family of movies that he's doing, which is kind of exciting. It's a very different take. Um, I, uh, I've spoken highly of this movie since it came out. I can't speak any higher of it. Uh, you know, the thing I said, quote, you can quote me, is that I think it's better than 78. And the only reason why 78 uh, gets a little, like just a slight notch below it is because 78 had the flying around the world, to set time backwards. And while I loved it and I love time travel, as I've mentioned on the show many times, it's one of my favorite conceits in science fiction. This movie didn't have that, and it was a lot better for it. So
That's so funny that you're using it as the metric, because
has to be.
I even when I was a kid I thought that was corny, but the older I get, the more I love it.
Keep in mind, in 1978, I was 5 years old. You would have been 10,
Right,
or 9 or 10 or something like
right.
I think we're 5 years apart. Um, and the problem with that is that at 5, your eyes are open to it. At 10, you're a little cynical.
You're a little cynical, but also when you think about it for 1 minute, you go, well, then why doesn't he do that for everybody?
Yeah.
And I'll say what the answer in some ways is. And I was talking to Jen, my girlfriend, about this last night. She has not seen the movie yet, or was it someone else I was talking to? I think I was telling Jen. I can't remember. But remember the scene in the new Superman movie? And it's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's not. But because it's whatever. To me, it explains an idea that we're all thinking in the back of our mind, which is, does Superman or Batman or any Flash or any superhero go to every crime scene? No, they can't. How could they? So the scene that Superman has where he's hanging out with Lois in his room and they're sitting by a window,
Mhm.
and in the background far away is this, which villain is it? Like
They
is
don't say.
it
They say it's an interdimensional imp, which is the usual the coded words for Mr. Mxyzptlk.
right?
No, but they don't say it out loud.
So they're fighting some weird electrical looking thing that looks like an electric starfish or something. And I think Green Lantern's out there, maybe Hawkgirl or someone else.
They all
And
three are, yeah.
they're just all kind of in the background fighting. And Superman and Lois are having this conversation, and you're watching a fight scene, and you keep thinking, Superman, aren't you supposed to go there and help fight this? No.
Lois actually says that. She goes, "Do you need to go out
Oh,
there?" He
oh,
goes, "They
right.
got it handled."
They got it. And it's because you can't fight every fight, you
True.
know? And what I love, what made you think in the 78 Superman, is like, is he going to fly backwards around the planet for every damn thing that happens, Because then if anybody got wind of that, they'd be like, well, you saved Lois, you reverse time. Like, can we go, save my kid that died yesterday and
Yeah,
go back in 2 days, but it's such an emotional, and Christopher Reeve sells it, and the editing and the filmmaking,
absolutely.
and when he screams no, or whatever it is he
Yeah, he
says,
does.
it is chilling,
The whole thing, like that sequence, he flies into the sky and he's above the clouds, and it's just like his father's voice saying, "You can't interfere." and it sounds like the voice of God, and it's like it's such a moving piece, you know what I mean? Like, and you're right, like it's for what it was, it's incredibly charming. It's very comic booky, like it's obviously, we know based on science, if you reverse the Earth's spin on the axis, it would destroy the Earth. But
Right.
again, it's a very comic book conceit, so I think that's why it gets the
But
pass.
you know, it's funny. A comic book writer would never have written this
No, never, never.
ever.
I mean, you grew up knowing Denny O'Neil. He wrote Superman. He would have
Right. Right. There's never would have happened. I'm trying to think if there's anything else before we get into part two of our comics creators versus.
I want to bring up something that we kind of started on last week, um, and I kind of want to do just a really short, not recap, but a little short continuation of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And the question that I get at conventions when I go, and people are looking at Stray. I'm not sure about you. This is why I want to ask it. Only because your work is so much more personal than mine is. Like it almost seems autobiographical in a sense, even though I've always sold Stray as being autobiographical. The question I always get is, where do you get your ideas from? And
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, like, well, I can probably pinpoint COVID Cop, obviously. I can probably pinpoint Red Hook because we've talked about it. But Billy Dogma doesn't have in my head anyway, it doesn't have like a set, like this is like a snippet of conversation or an incident that happened or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. In my head, it seems very created on the page. Does that make sense?
I think you're right. I mean, when I think about what led to me doing Billy Dogma and Jane Legit are well, I dubbed him the last romantic anti-hero, and I called them two love titans that are attracted to conflict, ergo a relationship. So that's the shorthand, right? But that's not how it started. It started with me drawing really funny pictures of my friend Shannon Goldman, who I was making fun of his face, and then after a while, it was just a shorthand. And then he had this like spit curl and blonde hair and like a boxy kind of mug, and he just looked pissed off all the time. And that's kind of where Billy Dogma started. Um, and then I had an opportunity to do a comic strip. Either it was something that I asked to be a part of the New York Hangover, which was a independently published, monthly rag, as it were, in the East Village. And I made friends with a guy named Tim Hall, who
Mm.
I've collaborated with, a great writer.
Yeah.
I miss that guy. He's still alive. We just haven't talked in years. And by the time he was one of the writers and like, I guess, co-editors, curators of content. And in talking about comics, I believe he either invited me or I said, hey, I should do a comic strip. And I did like, I don't know, a bunch of comic strips that got published there. And then eventually I was like, well, let me do a comic book story. So I think I wrote like a 6-page story where I now was using this character. And in some ways, he was my Popeye.
Yeah.
Everyone, I didn't have my character. I grew up reading comics wanting to draw their stories. And then when I discovered Picard and, Yummy Fur and independent comics and, all that stuff, I was like, well, I'm going to create my own character. So somehow I was using him, and then he had a girlfriend, and they would get into spats or adventures or whatever. But I had no plan,
Mhm.
like in a way, what you just said about did he develop on the page? He definitely developed on the
Yeah.
page. Like I didn't have a pitch. I didn't have a conceit. I was just basically trying to write and draw a fun comic strip, that would then turn into. And in fact, there's not that many pages of Billy Dogma.
Like
I
published, you
think
mean?
I think I have 48 pages here, plus like another 160 pages of what I did from Activate, which was Immortal and Fear My
Oh
Dear,
dear, yeah.
and then maybe a couple others. So I could literally publish one graphic novel, and you'd have all the Billy Dogma stories that I've done so far.
Like
But I
my
was attached to him in some way.
my thought process, whenever I'm coming up with an idea, is usually it's not that far removed from like say a Law and Order, where they say rip from the headlines or something like that. Um, More often than not, like I came up with this character a couple of months ago, and I usually start with characters and I build stories around them. Um, and the character that I came up with was I've landed on the name Hellion, and it's based on it's very very recent, so people will understand that where I'm coming from as soon as I say it. They had mentioned that they were doing an Ultimate Wolverine comic at Marvel, and that it's not Wolverine, he's the Winter Soldier. And it's like he's Winter Soldier in name only, but he's Wolverine in presentation. So I was like kind of not disappointed, but I was like, oh, there's an opportunity you missed. So I wanted to go, okay, what does the like if you literally take these two characters and mush them together, what do they look like? What is their purpose? That kind of thing. And that's how I came up with Hellion. And then I just started, once you have that character, you're kind of like, these are the kind of stories I can tell with him. And sometimes it's broad, sometimes it's very niche. And you can just kind of like plot around that character and what they think and what their reactions are to things. So in my head, like I start with a character. Do you start with a drawing first, or do you start with some
Well,
kind of prompt?
you just made me think of something, and I'll try to answer that question you just asked. But you just made me think about something interesting, which is I think a lot of alternative, let's call it characters, not Marvel and DC or Archie, but let's just say alternative, are born from, oh, what if I took their character and did this and made my own
Right.
by adding this wrinkle or doing this thing that they wouldn't do, because that's what makes it alternative, or that's what makes it, mature audiences over PG-13 or whatever, a standard mainstream comic book is supposed to be rated and sold to, in a way, this absolute line of comics that DC is doing, I was mentioning, we've said before, is almost like the bootleg versions of these characters, like a little
Yeah,
more
yeah.
extreme, versions, which would be more alternative. But so I think that's interesting that, a lot of characters like, the Coney is me riffing off the Punisher and probably, God, the Cassavetes movie with what's her name?
Gina
Uh,
Rollins.
Gina Rollins and, and my mom and a couple other, elements. So, but then why do you draw this as a character? Why do you design this? And then why would you tell a story?
Right.
For who? And usually, I don't know, Vito. I don't know if I could have been a good journeyman if was good enough to do the monthly comic. Like if I was good enough to be Jim Aparo, Kurt Swan,
Yeah.
and then also make me a writer. Not necessarily Frank Miller, but a journeyman who did a monthly book. I don't know if I could have done it. Because there's a certain consistency you have to have, and to be able to quote crank out the work. I'm not saying the work is bad, but it took me. I had to become a mature adult cartoonist to respect the likes of a Sal Buscema.
Right. Right.
Get John Buscema, who everyone lauds and loves, but his younger brother, who was kind of like not a clone of John Buscema, but same art style,
He was
same
dependable, which not to say that
dependable,
John wasn't, but Sal
right?
could crank out, like you're saying, like he could
And
crank out.
he drew the Hulk comics that I read written by Bill Mantlo,
Yeah.
like and other stuff. And I didn't blink. I didn't think, oh, this is kind of soft or like not as cool as the John Byrne comics and stuff at the time. It is what it is. But I don't know if I was even good enough to do that,
Yeah,
So
you mentioned Charles Soule a few minutes ago, and how he was writing, somewhere upwards at seven different series at the time, and you forget number one that he was also writing novels,
you know,
and he's also a working lawyer.
he must have been a terrible lawyer. He's like,
Well,
sorry, I got to write Daredevil. Sorry, guys.
we gotta bring him on and ask him like if his work suffered. But like the biggest conceit that I've heard about being a writer like I am is that I have a full-time job. I can't do it all the time. And then you look at Charles and his output, and it's just like unless you are going to the courthouse and just sitting in a room with your laptop there and just not doing anything, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't believe that he would do that, especially,
I
just the
probably
kind of
not,
guy.
but dollars or donuts, he snuck in a couple of
No
scripts.
way.
Snuck in. Chris
Maybe.
Miscavige, who I just had dinner with, was a background actor, and he'd be on
Yeah.
set for hours upon hours. And sometimes you're on, and often you're not, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of waiting in cinema and television. And most of the other background actors be sitting there kind of like complaining or eating their ninth donut or whatever,
Mhm.
and or just trying to book another gig, or be an actor, do the acting.
Yeah.
And he'd be sitting there writing graphic novels
Yeah.
and then getting pages sent to his iPad. And people would look at him like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "What? I'm making comics. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Like kind of a thing." And I always admired that about anybody who is willing to take kind of dead time or the lulls of a job and turn it, activate actionable work.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
to your credit, I don't think you've ever wasted time. You know what I mean? Like you might lose some time at the table by biking everywhere you go, depending on how far you're going and where you're going. But I don't think you lose that much, ultimately because you have that schedule of yours so I don't, maybe not a journeyman, but I think you would be able to crank out a comic in a month.
well, I think to a certain kind of credit, which is not the credit of cranking out the comic, for lack of a better term, Sal Buscema, Jim Aparo, Kurt Swan style. But I think like if you gave me the time to do 4 to 6 issues really well,
Yeah.
I might be able to pull that off. And I'm saying great, but maybe really well. And then I could take the time to draw better and to craft something more significant and meaningful. And again, I'm not disparaging or saying that the monthly comic book is crap, but it was semi-disposable. I don't know if that's, you had to make deadlines. It was deadline art, you know?
I kind of, maybe I'm romanticizing, a lot instead of just a little bit, but I kind of wish to achieve, this sounds so ass backwards, but I wish to achieve disposability with my work. You know
Mm,
what I mean? I don't crank out enough monthly to have
right.
that, but the idea of voraciousness and the soap opera angle of how comics used to be read, like Chris Claremont's X-Men is probably the best example of comics as a soap opera because like even though soap operas are daily and they're every like they're 5 days a week, 4 months out of the 4 weeks out of the month, they are in a way disposable because you're just constantly going to the next one, right?
Right. Right.
And so I kind of uh, wish to achieve that at some point, like where I'm just like, hopefully next year, like I mentioned last episode, there's at least 6 projects that I would like to
Yeah.
space out over the year. Um, oh, I got layouts for Pay the Devil from
Oh,
Steve Walker. They're just he just texted them to me and he's like, I didn't forget. And I was like, we got a year, man. We're just gonna like do the best comic we can. So
yes.
I'm not worried about
Yes.
it. So I'm
But
very, like it's just, like that's a book. I know that that's a 48 page
yes.
book,
Yeah.
but like, and I don't want that to be disposable, but I would love to make like, just stray comics or like underboss comics or, whatever. I don't lack for ideas. That's the thing. Like I come up with a new idea like every couple of days and I just start kind of making a family tree kind of, like, oh, this character would be this character would be that. And then I can kind of like, look at those individual characters and go, this is that guy's story. This is this woman's story. This is how there's a project at some point that I really want to do. And it's not a redesign, a reimagining of the King Arthur myth because I love Camelot 3000.
Hmm.
I want to do a King Arthur mythology with gangsters. And the only thing I'm trying to figure out is what is Excalibur or what is the Holy Grail? You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
what is the thing that they're trying to achieve? And I have a couple of different ideas, I've asked a couple of friends for ideas for what that could be, but I have this list of character names, and I'm like, oh, that's really, really good. Like,
Right,
it's
right.
like, just like these Italian mobster names for Arthur and
See, but you and that's again trying to find like coming up with something and like why is it there and then turning it, like I think Chess Face was an example of that for me. But the other thing you've been talking about in some ways is in terms of disposability or as the soap opera, manga does that really well.
yeah, yeah,
Like very well. Like they can sit with characters forever and have them talking and yapping and like, talking about something relevant or something that is evergreen. Who knows? And the other thing that happened is that they didn't have time to think editors and writers if they're putting out a monthly book, so they had to create a new villain of the week, as it were. And you could tell sometimes when you read certain stories that like, wow, okay, you're reading the New York Post that week, like,
yeah, yeah.
and you literally took a headline and turned it into something, and it's okay. But you can tell when they like were really like, oh, I want to develop this character, and I've been thinking about this character, and you can tell the difference,
Yeah,
and
I,
it's
I
not good enough to do mediocre comics. And again, I'm not saying I'm a great cartoonist. I would be a better cartoonist, I think, if I knew how to do mediocre. It sounds bad, but uh, publishable material. I don't know. I don't know.
I think
I don't know the term.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're saying to an extent is to make the comics that you make, how you make them, is not translatable to the monthly grind of the machine of monthly comics.
That's probably right.
And it has nothing to do with mediocrity, because I think if you found, I think, we talked about this when I was in the studio many years ago. Like, we were trying to figure out what would your quote unquote quick style be. Like, what are you sacrificing for? What are you,
Right.
adding? Are you sacrificing backgrounds? Are you sacrificing? I mean, your figures aren't super highly detailed. It's a Chest Face is definitely, with the way
Sure.
he's, built and stuff, he's definitely the most defined and
Yeah.
detailed character. But yeah, the Red Hook. What's the name of the publication again? The Red Hook.
Oh, the Red Hook Star Review.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
think that is going to be an exercise over the next, maybe not right now because you're still fresh in it, but I think over the next couple of months, as you keep doing it, I think you're gonna start, finding new ways to translate what's in your head to your hand. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and in a shorthand, because I
Yeah.
do want to lean into the shorthand as much as like I kick and scream, and I know that I'm not a person that renders with a lot of lines. I might draw or blue pencil a lot of lines, but what
Yeah.
I walk away with is less.
Yeah.
Like what was the Alex Toth line? Alex Toth said something about how like try to erase all the stuff that doesn't matter and then draw the hell out of what does, or
Hmm.
something like that, or
That's
something to that effect.
sounds
um
like him.
because he was such a minimalist, but at the same time it was so elaborate when you
Yeah.
looked at it. Like, how did he draw that? So I
I
don't know. I
also
think
I also think that if I had the ability to draw, I would get so much less done. Like, I might still be the idea machine that I am, but if I were physically doing it myself and, like, taking, like, I would be so much slower which is hard to
but you
imagine.
know what, that might be good, because in a way I think you crank out so many ideas,
Yeah.
and then you and Matt Major just basically design characters left and right, and like what, and then they need stories,
You know,
you know
the, I've toyed with the idea of putting a lot of these characters kind of in the public domain, just so, just like, hey, I created this, you can work on this.
I think as a project, I think if you did a project where you were the curator, editor, showrunner, and you
Mhm.
decided, I'm going to put out some characters, and then you're going to create their stories or however many pages and create a graphic novel or an anthology out of that. I think that'd be a really or call it a project, right?
Yeah.
Some kind of workshop project. I think that would be great. The thing that I'm worried about, and I was having this thought the other day, is AI. AI, what if somebody decided today, and I almost don't want to say it out loud because I might activate it just by saying it, or some
But
idiot's
it's
going to go do
probably already
this.
been thought of or done.
Thought
So,
of
you know what I mean?
is come up with 1 million or 10 million comic book characters.
Mhm.
You know, every combination of name or like, and then just they start spitting it out to the point where they will all be taken. Like it'll be almost, it's already impossible to come up with a character
Right.
name right
Right.
now. Imagine if someone activated that and said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna." Now, I think there might be laws and rules against using AI to generate copyright written ideas. I think I'm
Mm.
not sure. So, or if somebody put the red hook, and this is something that somebody did, and I might have mentioned this in the past, and made songs through an AI generator or music machine, they can't copyright the fact that they used my character.
Right.
So I'm in the clear if I was already attempting to do that same song idea on my own, but then somebody did it in 2 minutes, you know,
Mhm.
with AI. So I don't know what the idea what the rules are about that, you know. But in
I would
speaking
love to.
of,
I would love to show run like an anthology like that. I should
and you could
probably.
do it with young kids, like it would be for novice artists and rookies, you know, and
What's that Facebook group that we're a part of with they did the Liefeld bootleg. You know what I'm talking about? I think it's like
it
PK something. You know, like it's based off a cartoonist kayfabe. Like and like
right.
the fans, you know, went into. I could probably just like you know, the problem is money, time and money are the biggest problems. You know,
Well,
sometimes.
but I what I could see is if you had if you had limitations,
Mm,
like here's 100 characters. I'm going to do a workshop. We're going to teach you comics, but we're going to use these characters, and they have just enough information and a design. Actually, few weeks ago when I was teaching comics, I encouraged everyone to create a character, their own
mm,
character, whether it was them, something they designed, whoever. And some people were having a tough time. I said, well, if you want to do Batman, do a Batman or do your
mm,
favorite character. And some people did that instead. They're not going to go sell this. You know,
right.
these are kids learning how to make comics. They're 9 and 12 years old, you know, like, so I wasn't worried about that. But to create a workshop or a project where you're teaching comics, but also lending them characters that, you know, let's say someone came up with a really good idea and you decided to take it to a publisher,
Yeah.
they would be in on it. They were a co-creator. You know, whether or not they could draw it or not depends on the skill set and level or whatever. But that's an interesting kind of teaching tool that also has like IP, you know, latitude.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's an idea.
To be continued. All right, let's do it, man.
All
It's
right.
time.
So when we left off last, I believe in our comics creators versus was Ramona Fradon and Marie Severin. I
We,
think.
I think so. If not the one right after, I know we mentioned it. Just so we catch everybody up, if you hadn't
Yes.
watched last week's episode, we've been doing these kind of games with ourselves, you know, of trying to not necessarily determine the best of anything. We did it with like best single issue comics or best comic run. You know, I think I mentioned a couple of comics, and we did like a tournament style. But the verses is basically, you know, let's you know kind of put two similar, maybe like-minded, related creators against each other, and who's. Would you say who's the best? I don't think that's necessarily the
No, I think what you're doing is if you had to, for lack of a better term, kill one or diminish or make, you had to pick one over the other.
right.
You
Like
know, in
get rid of
terms
the
of your
others.
life. So the point of the conversation is that you learn about us. You learn
Yep.
about what we like. You also learn about the creators we're talking about a little bit. So we're also giving props to them. So at the end of the day, it's not really that we're killing one over the other. It's
Right.
just that you're choosing one over the other if you had to, which is like not realistic. It's just
No.
part of the game, and there is no winner here. You know, they're all winners because we're talking about them all. You know,
Yeah.
and by the way, I think 5 pages of paper here that are full of names, and we only got through halfway through the first page. So
I love it.
this is going to go for a while. Not
Well,
tonight,
that's
but
why I'm
over
giving
the,
us a lot of time now.
yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start off 5 down from the last, and I'll go back up
Okay.
uh, because I think I mentioned, and I gave you a week to think about it. So I don't know if you thought about it, if you forgot.
Okay.
But the next verses is Chris Claremont versus Do you have a thought? I've already
I feel
written it
like it's
down.
Alan Moore, but I don't know.
We already did Alan Moore
I know, but I mean, I'm trying to like
with Stan Lee.
Chris Claremont against Stan Lee. Is that really the
Nope.
one?
No.
Oh,
No. Alan Moore was
oh,
versus Stan
that's
Lee.
right. That's right. So
Okay.
who's Chris Claremont?
When you hear it, it's going to be obvious. Marv Wolfman.
Yeah, that is obvious. I mean, that's an obvious matchup, not an obvious winner. Like that's not.
Oh yeah, and so let's put it in context a little bit. Chris Claremont, famously known for writing X-Men,
Mhm.
okay, which like is the X-Men that you see on TV and in the movies. That run with John Byrne and Dave
Cartoons.
Cockrum and Paul Smith and John Romita.
Yeah, I think
Um,
the X-Men 97 cartoon on Disney Plus is based almost entirely on Chris Claremont comics. You know,
right,
whether it be with Jim Lee or not. You know, like I think,
right. And when we were talking before about soap opera, he was a master at that.
yeah, yeah,
And then Marv Wolfman was the only comic that could confront X-Men when that was coming out. Was that was the new Teen Titans
yeah.
with artist George Perez.
I mean, we can't forget that Marv Wolfman.
He wrote my first Fantastic Four comic I read, issue
Marv
number
did.
197.
I didn't know
Marv
that.
Wolfman. Yeah. I've
I
hung out with Marv Wolfman. I've hung out with Chris Claremont.
Yeah. Well, you were just with Chris Claremont a couple months ago at a movie.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
the I think the true, not test, but the true determining factor is, yes, if you put X-Men versus New Teen Titans, they kind of cancel each other out. So what else is there? You know, like what other properties would you bring up?
And that's how I had to decide
Yeah, and
my answer. And I think we're going to come to the surprising answer.
I think it's Marv. You know,
It's
because
Marv
I
Wolfman.
think Crisis on Infinite Earths is like, and I praise, that's my Bible, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in a very real way. Like, for a lot of the things that I do, I mean, you can, you know, probably draw a straight line from my work to Marv's work, you know, like in terms of like, of influence and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that you couldn't to Chris Claremont either, but the only other thing, and I know this isn't true, the only, okay, two things. The only other two things I can think of that Chris Claremont did was Sovereign Seven at DC after his X-Men run, which didn't really set the world on fire, and Heroes for Hire is the only other thing I can think of that Chris
I
did.
don't remember that with Chris, but then he wrote an FF run with I think Jim Lee. Didn't he write
That would have been
Heroes Reborn,
yeah, I
whatever?
was gonna say like post Onslaught.
And
Yeah.
I remember not being a fan of that. And listen, like, you know, I like, of course, I love those X-Men and I like Chris Claremont's writing. I like Chris Claremont. But Marv Wolfman also as an editor.
Yeah.
Also, he wrote horror, I think. Did he wrote Tomb of Dracula famously with
Yes, with Gene
Gene
Colan.
Colan? Like, come on, the pedigree, it keeps getting longer on Marv Wolfman's side, you know?
Yeah, it's not only that, it's just that like if you look at the quality behind the work that he did, and that's not to say that Chris doesn't have quality, you know,
Right.
that he hacked anything out or anything like that. It's just I can't find in my head a bad Marv Wolfman comic.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I can't
Vigilante.
still good. I mean,
That's
it
what I
might
mean.
suffer at some point, but it's still, you know,
That's what I mean.
solid.
Like he
Same
was solid.
Deathstroke the Terminator mini like series, not mini series, but
Didn't he also do Spider-Man? He must have written Spider-Man, I
I'm sure at some
assume.
point. I feel like he did like some kind of special Spider-Man issue, maybe like Spider-Man and Wolverine or something like that, or you know, like in that kind of like prestige format type of thing. But yeah, I think it's Marv.
It's
I,
Marv Wolfman.
I can't like. It's so weird if you take Chris Claremont out of any equation of creator versus creator, and you say not only do you take him out, you take out his work, you lose the X-Men. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it stops at issue 59 before Giant Size X-Men comes in. You know, everything else, I mean, Len Wein did Giant Size X-Men, so you can't truly say that, but it doesn't, nothing that,
Doesn't become what it became.
right.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that it's a shame in a sense that he's only recognized as the X-Men, you know, creator. But I think Marv is like the quintessential DC creator. You
Yep.
know, even though he's worked for Marvel, I think Marv is like the architect of a lot of what we know as the DC universe.
Yep. All right, and because you have to do this, John Byrne versus George Perez.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. I don't know if I've said it enough on this show, but I probably have. When I was growing up, I knew that every Uncanny X-Men comic that I read, obviously up until a certain point, was Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Terry Austin, uh, Tom Orzechowski, and Glynis Oliver. That was the team, you know what I mean? And even though I was young enough to recognize their names on a cover, or in Marvel's case on the inside splash page, um, I knew what I was gonna get. You know, I knew I was gonna get the book that I wanted to read. Um, After, Byrne has got some incredible, like, I don't know what he was smoking to think that like he wouldn't need Chris Claremont, but he smoked the hell out of it, and he didn't need Chris Claremont. Do you know what I mean? Like, you look at, and no offense to Chris, obviously, but John Byrne, I thought he was just an artist as a kid. And then he became like this artist writer, writer artist on FF, on Cap. Did he? No, he drew Cap for Roger Stern. I don't think he wrote the ones that he drew, but he might have co-plotted them, at the very least.
Sure.
So you have his FF run. You have, I don't think he's ever done an Avengers run, which is weird.
He did West Coast Avengers.
That's right.
Which was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, that was used in Scarlet Witch TV show.
You should have, that book should have never been a success. Alpha Flight is another good one.
Alpha Flight.
Bring up.
Yeah. And then DC, then he took over DC,
He did Doom Patrol. He did Orion, not Orion, but
Jack Kirby's New Gods.
Yeah.
He did Superman.
Famously,
and actually he wrote the Thing series that Ron Wilson drew.
That's the one that came after Secret Wars, right?
It came after Secret Wars, and of course after Marvel 2-in-1 ended. So,
yes.
George Perez, Avengers, New Teen Titans, Fantastic Four, he graphic novels. What was this? Did they ever do an Avengers versus Justice League? Or that was on the table, right?
They did it. No,
they did it.
Yeah.
All right. So,
you remember me at Baltimore trying to scour the back issue bins for issues, and then I found a guy that had all four in a pack for like $100. I was like, I can't leave without this.
So he definitely is the contender to John Byrne.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because we're all fans of comics. At one point, after the people who created comics, everyone starts off as a fan of the medium, and then you become a pro, hopefully, if you want to work in the business. But I could tell the difference between John Byrne and George Perez. That George Perez definitely his origins was as a fan.
Yeah.
Because of how he when I say over rendered, I don't mean many lines, but he could pack a panel, big time. He could draw team books.
His cover work,
yes.
But
John Byrne, you could tell, was more of an artist.
Here's the thing.
That makes sense.
If you could, could you imagine John Byrne doing A Crisis on Infinite Earths, or War of the Gods, or Justice League versus Avengers? Could you imagine?
I think he could do a couple of splash pages with 1 billion characters, but I think after a while I think he would burn out, whereas George thrived on that.
The other metric that we can use to measure these two against each other is creator-owned work. You have Next Men, Trio. You have a couple. Helix, I think, was another one at IDW. For John Byrne. And then you have Crimson Plague, which diminishing returns. It's about a character that gets her period and gets superpowers, I think. I'm not kidding.
Which,
you might think I'm making that up, anybody listening to this, but I'm not. That's actually true. I think that The creator, the better creator is probably Byrne. The better, oh boy, I feel
No,
sick trying to say this. The better artist is George Perez.
I actually I think John Byrne's the better artist,
Do you
and
really?
I think it's because and I'm trying to figure it out why. Why do I feel that way? I think it's because he was such a Kirby fan, and I can see him
Mhm.
being the heir to Kirby. Because in a way he was our Jack Kirby.
He is still, yeah.
He is our Jack Kirby, you know. And George was not our Jack Kirby, you
I
know.
think the other thing that might be painting my judgment is the fact that George is no longer with us. And
Hmm.
Byrne, he just got announced, I think at San Diego, that the project, the X-Men project that he's been kind of doing on his own, that he never planned on publishing, is now going to be published by Abrams.
No,
So,
yeah, it's 39 issues of him continuing the X-Men run after the issue that he left his
right,
X-Men run.
right.
But
which is which is petty and bitchy as hell. number number one. And I've never claimed that John Byrne was anything but a bitch because like there was one point where this is a true story. I don't know who I heard it from, but this is a true story. Somebody came up to him at a signing with a reprint of a book that he did, like it was like a reprinted material inside. And instead of signing it, this bitch stamped it with a
Oh my God, with the stamp. So I have two quick John Byrne stories and a George Perez story.
okay.
One, the first time I met John Byrne, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the Holy Grail, was at a Chicago Comic Con. I was with Josh Neufeld. I think it was my first real Comic Con. I believe we had Keyhole #1, and we were going around to certain people we admired. I bumped into Harlan Ellison. I met him, and I gave him a copy. He was nice. And I'm sure I gave it to other people, but then I dared to go over to John Byrne's table. And what was weird is that it was empty. Nobody was there except John Byrne sitting there,
Yeah.
which is crazy. And I go over to him and I tell him how much I admired him, and he kind of didn't give a shit, right?
Yeah.
Which is like, okay, maybe he's so used to hearing this. And I offered him my comic, Keyhole #1, and he looked at it and he said, "This is for me." I said, "Yeah, I would love for you to read it. I made work in there, and at some point check it out." And he said, "Thank you." And he pulled his hand over to the right and he dropped it in midair. And I started to think, oh my God, he's throwing my comic on the floor. No, he dropped it onto a pile of other people like me who had come up to him and said, read my comic book. And I could tell, oh, that's why he was just like, I'm not going to read your, what are you talking about? Like, and then years later, I want to say this is about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5. I can't tell with COVID time anymore. I was at New York Comic Con. I was hanging out with Walt Simonson. I think we were at the IDW booth.
I've seen that picture.
Right. And I was like, oh my God, there's John Byrne, and he's wearing a leather jacket. And I'm standing there going, I have to talk to him. I have to at least try to redeem like what had happened and see if I can get something good out of this. And once again, I introduced myself. I might have mentioned we met eons ago. I did not talk about the comic book that he dropped.
Mhm.
And I was trying to figure out what is a quick question I could ask him that maybe nobody has asked. And I said, you've done such great work on all the Jack Kirby characters, but you haven't done them all. Is there one you wish you could have tackled that you didn't? And he thought about it for a second. He said, Devil Dinosaur.
That's a weird one.
I know, right? So, okay. And I feel like he inked a Jack Kirby pencil Devil Dinosaur cover.
I feel like I've seen like a cover recreation that he did of Devil Dinosaur.
Maybe or something. But anyway, that's the answer I got, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then my quick George Perez story is I was at Baltimore Comic Con years ago. We go every year when we can.
Rub it in, dude.
George Perez, George Perez, I could hear him talking. He had a big line of people of kids wanting to show their portfolio, and I think
told me
I've told
this
you
story. The story's
yeah,
great.
yeah. Just really quick. So he's sitting there looking at this kid's art, and all I hear him is say, "So you see the way you drew these cars?" And the kid goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You see the way you drew the background?" He goes, "Yeah." "You see the way you're drawing the people?" He goes, "Yeah." "Do you see the way you draw those faces, no expressions?" And he kept saying, "Do you see the way you?" And he'd point this out and point that out, and the kid would say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And finally, he goes, "Don't do that anymore. Don't stop doing it like that because it's just not working for you." And it was like this weird kind of like scathing kind of criticism, but in a very nice way. And then I probably gave him some tips like learn perspective,
Mhm.
draw from real life, and use models at first, before you use your imagination, kind of a thing. So
I
anyway,
my choice is George Perez.
you're George, I'm John Byrne.
Yeah,
Okay, awesome.
it's good when we disagree.
Again, both winners, man.
Oh, no,
So
absolutely.
I'm gonna throw the next one is you know what? I'm gonna go 3 for 3. This one's a little Rambo. And I'm gonna play the game of who do you think I'm picking as the verses. Michael Golden versus
I want to say Walter
nope.
Howard.
Think nope.
Hmm.
I think of this person as an acolyte of Michael Golden
Oh, interesting. I don't know.
because he has many acolytes actually.
Sure. I don't know that yeah, I think that's I'm tapping out. Who do you?
Art Adams.
Oh God. Yeah, that makes total sense. I don't know why I
Yeah.
didn't think of that. So the question is, who?
So let's talk about Michael Golden and his work. Now he's a guy that doesn't have long runs on comics,
No,
but when
no.
he shows up, he puts a permanent imprint in the series, like when he drew Mr. Miracle.
Hmm.
I mean, he's done great covers, like great
Yeah,
covers. I hope somebody publishes his cover someday.
he
He
does.
did Micronauts. He
I have
did
a
Micronauts.
art book that Michelle got me one year from I think it was at Baltimore. She got or maybe Heroes of Michael Golden covers.
Oh, that's
She
awesome.
got from Renee.
Oh, you mean something that he published, maybe that they
Yeah,
published?
yeah, like that he had at his table.
Oh, I got to check that out next time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he did Micronauts. He did, like I said, Mr. Miracle. He did a Nom.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, but he has more like not as many long runs of comics. I think he drew some Batmans. He definitely drew some
Yeah,
Batman.
he drew I know he
Batman
drew one that
Family,
Archie
maybe.
wrote. Um
Oh,
uh
Archie Goodwin.
yeah, it might have been Legends of the Dark Knight, but I know he did something with Archie at some point on Batman because I remember. Oh, he did a Batman annual, and it was the introduction of a bad guy named the Wraith, which was basically the opposite of Batman. Like his parents were criminals, they got
Oh,
killed,
okay.
he saw them, he went through the system, and he ended up being just like Batman. He was like the opposite of Batman. Um,
So, and speaking of introductions, he drew the first Rogue because he drew
yeah,
Avengers Annual number 10, written by Chris Claremont.
yeah,
And then Art Adams, I mean, again, a guy whose hyper detailed and rendering style only allows him to draw so much, but he co-created Long Shot with Anna Senti. He, I think, drew a 4-issue arc of Fantastic Four on Walt Simonson's run.
Monkey Man and O'Brien for Dark Horse, his creator-owned book.
Um, Again, another cover artist that does a lot of, you just Michael Golden and R. Adams are the go-to guys if you want to have like a great pinup or a great cover image.
I think
Um,
the I don't know what the metric is to measure them against each other, because they're both so similar. Um, it really comes down to like how, and this sounds like a criticism, but it's not. It comes down to how busy you want your art to be.
mhm,
Like when you're reading, like how busy do you need it to be? Granted,
mhm,
I just picked George Perez over John Byrne, and George Perez's art is the most busy
mhm,
comparatively to John Byrne. John Byrne's very clean, very easy
mhm,
to read. George Perez gives you not necessarily Easter eggs, but he does pack the panel with a lot of
mhm.
stuff. Now, the other two, Golden and Art Adams, don't pack a panel like that, but their art style makes you think you're looking at more than what's actually there. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
There's an elaboration. There's
Yeah,
a majesty to their art that I don't get from Byrne and Perez, but there is something literally golden about Michael Golden's art. Like
yeah,
he puts a shine that I've never understood how he figured that out. And it looks like modules, like the way
yeah.
he draws. Where Art Adams, I think, might be the more fan favorite, But if I had to pick, I'm going to go with Michael Golden because I felt he was super unique. And like I started the conversation about Golden versus Adams, I feel like Adams is an acolyte, although he's like the best acolyte ever that you could ever get.
I think I go Adams only because I think he took what Michael Golden did and kind of not perfected it, not made it better, but just
He mainstreamed it. I would say he mainstreamed Golden.
That's a good way to put it.
Because he's an amazing art, incredible, right?
Yes,
There's
nobody
can. They both are, but there's something about Michael Golden's work that still feels like outlier art. Like you look at it, and sometimes you're like, "What am I look? How did this guy draw this way?"
Yeah.
Whereas Art Adams, you go, "I could never draw like that," but at least you can understand it. You know?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think I still go with Art Adams.
That's because you're a fanboy. Okay.
Admittedly.
I'm gonna not go to the next bunch here. I'm gonna go backwards to 4 back. This is weird. I think I got this wrong, but I could not figure out. You'll see.
Okay.
Pat Boyette, and I'll explain him in a minute, versus Joe Staton, and I think that's wrong.
Ooh.
And let's just put it in context. Pat Boyette, an incredible artist if you ever get to see his art, co-creator of Peacemaker. Go look at those comics he drew. And I forget what else he's drawn. I know I have seen him, but every time I see his art, I'm like, this guy's incredible. But I don't know how many comics he drew. Whereas Joe Staton, I've seen, first of all, he's a sweetheart of a guy and his
Absolutely.
wife. And great artist, and I loved E-Man when I was a kid, and I would pick up those E-Mans, and then even when he resurrected it at First Comics, E-Man, and then he drew Green Lantern. He's drawn everything. He's drawn a ton.
Guy Gardner.
He co-created Guy Gardner,
who's having a moment right now.
That's right. So, and we want to keep this one simple, unless you have a thought. Well, what's your thought?
I'm looking at, what's weird is that I can pick out Joe Staton's artwork like that. I've known Joe drew my first Scooby-Doo story. So
oh my God.
I'm partial, obviously. And I can pick Joe's artwork I'm a fan, He even drew a Stray pinup for me. So
wow.
I'm very keen on Joe's art. I actually had to look up Pat Boyette's art, and I see it. And I see what you're thinking in terms of the two of them. I think because they worked almost like Charlton and
like that Charlton 70s thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's what I was kind of going for.
I think it's weird, Pat Boyette's got a very keen draftsmanship to him.
Yeah.
And to me, Joe is just quintessential. You know what I mean?
Agreed. In fact, when I think about Pat Boyette, I do think, and I don't think he's on my master list, but I could almost see a Pat Boyette versus Gray Morrow.
Yes. Yeah, I could see that.
And then it makes you wonder, well, then who's Joe Staton's proper versus?
I don't think I think you're right on with Pat Boyette though. Like I think there is a very, you're thinking of Charlton Comics, you're thinking of who published E-Man? I want to say First.
No. Well, First did, but originally it was Charlton.
Was it? Okay. So,
yeah, Charlton. I think Charlton. Nicole Cudi.
Yeah.
Nikolai Cudi or something is the name of the writer, the co-creator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think
I think you're right putting these two together. It might seem unfair in a way. I can't. Joe draws Dick Tracy, man. Is there anything better than that?
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. Like, and that's not, Boyette died in 2000. Here's the thing. I didn't know he was a broadcaster, like a radio guy.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. But the thing about Boyette's artwork as I'm looking at it, again, when you said his name, I couldn't, I knew Peacemaker. I actually own one of the Charlton Peacemakers that he did. Cool. I couldn't picture his artwork, whereas Joe, it's right there. So I feel like, in looking at it, it's very much of its time, where Joe just seems timeless.
So transcends time. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Right. So I would say Joe
Staton for sure.
And that's not even me being partial to the guy that drew my first Scooby-Doo.
Right. All right. Trina Robbins
Ooh, good.
versus Joyce Brabner. And for obvious reasons and not so obvious reasons.
Yeah. I mean, obvious, they're both women, I guess, you
Both
know.
women. Trina Robbins, I think, was one of the progenitors and editors of the first female underground comics.
What was it called?
Joyce
Women with
Brabner,
an I? Like
maybe women with a
WIMMEN?
Y, you mean, maybe, or
Okay.
not, or Y. Like Tits and Clits, I might have been, I don't know.
Mhm.
And I got to meet her less than a year before she passed away, and she was a sweetheart of a
Dynamite.
person.
We had her at the
And of
store.
course, I knew Joyce Brabner very well, very well. That's a whole other show, okay?
I
But Joyce Brabner famously uh, married Harvey Picar, and then also helped with his stories, maybe even co-written some of his stories, wrote her own stories, very political. Both of them were very political, very rah, 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 protest, underground comics, you know. It's really difficult to choose between the two. And I think Trina also drew, if I'm
yes.
correct, right?
Yeah.
Which
I
Joyce did.
my gut says Trina only because of the academic work that she did in curating and getting women cartoonists recognized.
Mm,
I think without Trina, we don't get the recognition of a Marie Severin and Ramona that we've talked about. I
mhm.
don't think we get recognition of Colleen Duran. I don't think we get recognition of even Joyce to an extent.
Sure,
I
sure.
think Trina putting the spotlight on female creators really,
Right.
you know, I think that accelerates her in my estimation of her.
And I will say, I mean, behind the scenes, Joyce definitely helped out a lot of people
Yes.
and get a lot of young female cartoonists and male cartoonists their first jobs are off the ground and again super political and a force to be reckoned with. And again, I could do a whole show just about Joyce and the conversations we were having before she passed away. I have a book,
Hmm.
okay. So with that in mind, I guess we'll lean toward Trina Robbins. You
Yeah,
know,
it's again,
it's
it's
hard.
based on, I think, in the same sense of me being a fanboy for Art Adams. You know what I mean? I think you have a partiality to Joyce that I don't think any of us can really compare to. You know,
Right.
if you were to say Joyce, I don't think anybody would argue with you.
Right.
I
No,
mean, like,
totally.
whereas,
Totally.
you know, I'm kind of divorced from the whole thing.
Right.
I can say I think Trina did more for women as a whole in comics
Right.
than not. You know, and not that Joyce didn't. I just mean
Right.
that if that were her only contribution to being on this list, I think that's enough. But she
Right.
did other stuff as well.
Right. And the next two could have also been verses with, let's say, a Trina or Joyce, and then two other males. And I decided to do female versus male
Hmm.
twice. And I could be totally wrong, but it'll create some conversation. Linda Barry
Ooh,
versus Jeffrey Brown.
wow, how similar are they? I never really put that together.
Well, so they both do autobio type comics. Linda Barry is a teacher through her comics as
Hmm.
well as making comics to teach with.
Yeah,
Both really scruffy, naive looking art, as it were,
salt of the earth type art. You know what I mean? Very,
Absolutely.
very almost garage. You know, like a garage band. You know, with music being very DIY.
Right.
I
And
don't
then,
know.
I think Linda wrote a novel called Cruddy.
Yes.
She drew ugly girl art, and when everyone else is trying to draw like Cherry and, Mary Jane Watson and,
Mhm.
Jeffrey Brown also was just crude and rude and telling autobio stories in a very innate way. And then went on to do like a ton of mainstream Star Wars kids
Yeah.
comics.
Yeah.
Like what the
Darth Vader and son,
um
Darth Vader and daughter, like stuff like that. Yeah. It's so weird. Like
um
it's such a, you know, in terms of being a part of the comic book creating community, it's such a weird validation. Do you know what I mean? Like to
Yeah.
get that gig,
Yeah.
but my God, he draws the crap out of those. So I mean, like they're
Yeah.
fun. They're exactly
Yeah.
what they're meant to be, you know.
But if you had to pick between the two, I feel like Linda Berry
Yeah,
is the winner because of how much her comics teach all ages
I
how to make
feel
comics, and I use her in my own teaching methods.
yeah, I feel like if she didn't exist, you wouldn't have no, maybe not necessarily. I can't say that for sure, but I feel like
You might have slicker autobiocomics. I think she allows anyone. She allows Whitney Matheson to make comics. She allows Jen Ferguson or anybody with a pen and paper to make comics.
I
She
think
begs you to make comics.
I think the thing about Linda Barry is that while it's not like the polished Jim Lee artwork that you think of comics, the greatest thing about it is that it is comics. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like it can, like it says this can be comics too, instead of
Hmm.
just Neil
Hmm.
Adams or Marshall Rogers or something like that.
Yep. All right, the next one, I was pretty proud of this. Howard Cruz versus Alison Bechdel.
I knew it. As soon as you said Howard Cruz, I knew you were going to say Alison Bechdel. Um,
Howard Cruz, no longer with us,
yeah,
I believe, and gay cartoonist, underground alternative cartoonist, used a lot of stippling in his art. Wrote, I forget the name of the graphic novel, but he wrote some very important graphic novels and comics. And then, of course, Alison Bechdel famously took 7 years to write and draw her magnum opus, Fun Home,
Mhm.
to then and she also did a comic strip about lesbians, which I forget where that got published, but it has been collected and has since done
Was
like
it Dykes to
four
Watch Out For?
Dykes to Watch Out For, and has since Fun Home done like another 3 or 4 graphic novels.
And I think
That
Fun Home got turned into a
uh,
Broadway play
a
or musical.
musical, and was it also maybe a movie or not yet?
I don't believe so.
Right.
Howard
So
Cruz's big one was Stuck Rubber Baby.
Stuck Rubber Baby. That's right. Very important works. The
Yeah,
both.
yeah. It in you know the great thing about their two, let's say predominantly queer works, like Stuck Rubber Baby and Dykes to Watch Out For, again, showing that comics can be about anything, can tackle any subject matter. At that point, we had seen uh, plenty, in the underground movement, like out of San Francisco, um, with the Crumbs and Spain Rodriguez's and everything. I think Howard Cruz was part of that group too. Maybe not initially, but shortly
Right.
thereafter.
Aileen Kaminsky,
Yeah,
Aileen Kaminsky, Robert Crumb's
wife,
wife.
and
And there was Roberta Gregory. I mean, I'm thinking of female cartoonists
yeah,
right now. A Bitchy Bitch, and I think they're doing a collection of that right now. And then who did oh God, Donna Barr, I'm thinking. I don't remember the name of
yeah,
the comic that Donna
yeah. I
Barr
can't
did. Of
think of her.
course, famously the Julie Doucette, you know,
Uh, I'm thinking of Paige.
Jessica Abel's Art Babe.
What was Paige's last name? Paige.
A cartoonist?
Yeah,
I don't know.
she's a queer cartoonist too.
Is this a newer cartoonist?
Relatively within our generation, like I think kind of on the heels of an Alison Bechdel. Uh,
Okay. Well, Alison Bechdel, I feel, is the goddaughter of a Howard Cruz, right?
Absolutely.
Basically,
Yeah, yeah.
So you got to give Howard Cruz his props,
I think like there's Wendell as well. Howard Cruz did, which was
Right.
I think an older work than Stuck Rubber. Stuck Rubber Baby, I think, was published by DC through Paradox.
I
No,
think Paradox Press might have published that. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Hardcover.
that's a pretty big endorsement. Like this is not Vertigo. This is not DC proper. This was
Right.
a third imprint. Paradox Press. And then you think, and then you take all that, and then you look at Fun Home, and Fun Home is just heavy and moving and just
And super accessible in a lot of
yeah,
ways. Like I think
yeah,
what Allison did is she found the secret sauce
Mhm.
and made it that, like, I think that was part of the success of this. In fact, now I'm blanking on her name, but I feel like for very different reasons. Who's the woman? Oh my God. And I introduced her to Art Spiegelman because he was talking about her at Miami Book Fair, and she sat next to me. And Monster is her book. What's the name of the? Oh God, Fantagraphics published it, and
Yeah.
they just came out with the
Is that
second one.
yeah, that just and they
Uh,
talking about it just recently too.
and then there was a sequel. Hold on, it's oh, that's not it. The hell's this?
Hmm.
Is it not called Monster?
I thought it was.
Uh, why can't I remember her name? I've talked to her many times. This is embarrassing because I'm old. Fanta Graphics. Let me at least type that in, see what happens.
Uh, I was thinking of Paige Braddock, by the way.
Oh, Paige Braddock. I've heard of her, of
Yeah.
course. Uh, oh, my favorite thing is Monsters by
Right.
Emil Ferris.
Hmm.
Emil Ferris. I feel like she's picked up the baton of it, not in the necessarily in the queer, because I don't know. Have you read the book?
I haven't.
I have not yet either, and I will. Um, all right. Well,
Stats.
between Howard Cruz and Alison Bechdel, I feel like Alison Bechdel might
I agree. I think
edge out.
I think only because had Howard not kind of handed the baton off in a figurative sense, I don't think you would get an Alison Bechdel. It's the same argument of Marjane Satrapi. You know what I mean? Like the 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 difference being that she could have stayed doing Dykes to Watch Out For, but this epic story came out of her. You know what I
You're
mean?
talking about so Marjane Satrapi, her verses was Joe Sacco, but then you mentioned maybe Guy Delisle would have
Diddley,
been the
yeah,
more or Guy, because Joe Sacco is obviously going to be hard to trump,
right, right,
and yet, as important as Howard Cruz was, he set the stage to
sure,
let Alison Bechdel happen.
absolutely. And I think,
So maybe that's what we're trying to say.
yeah, and I think that but my argument being that it's Allison because the stage was set and the performance that she put on was the performance of a lifetime. Like,
Sure,
what
sure.
it's not just, yes, there have been books that have come out after, but I think that that one book just like I
Yeah,
could all the Howard Cruz books together might I don't think Stuck Rubber Baby's as good as Fun Home, and maybe that's just me.
sure. I mean, that's what I mean about the more accessible
Yes,
is
yes,
that
you're right.
it it, it you can dive right in. You get to a family setting. There's a death that happens that kind of turns into a weird murder mystery.
Yeah,
Did he jump in front of the car, or did the car hit him?
yeah,
And emerge, and then living in this literary family and emerging and discovering, you're homosexual.
yeah.
It's a great book.
Mhm.
It is, like you said, it's a lifetime achievement. Just she
It's a
never has to
Mount
do another comic ever again, and
it's a Mount Rushmore book. I mean, like
totally
if you're looking at the indie comics Mount Rushmores, you have Love
right,
and Rockets, you have Fun Home,
right,
and then we can argue about the other two. You know what I
right.
mean? Like I think
Flaming Carrot.
there's a good one. Sure, let's go. Let's
Um,
choose next.
Next up is, and you might, well, okay, Richard Corbin
Ooh, okay.
versus Jeff Darrow. And I know
Wow, that's
that's
a
not,
good. No,
it's not
that's
fair,
really good.
but there's something there in terms of originality, in terms of having a pure, unexpurgated, voice and force of nature of what you did. Nobody draws like Corbin.
No,
Nobody draws like Jeff Darrow, although you could maybe make a tiny argument that there's an Art Adams adjacent kind of
Steve Scroche
uh,
is
Steve
another one.
Scrose. There are
Um,
people, but still nobody draws like Jeff Darrow.
I think the biggest factor I think in these two is accessibility. I think a lot of Corbin's work was done overseas or for like a heavy metal, right?
Well,
So
also like he did a character called Den for heavy metal
yes,
that had just like this naked character with a swinging dick,
yeah,
like,
and
or he did weird horror, or he did all the creepy. magazine. You know, he did a lot of horror, sci-fi, sex, right?
But that's my
Whereas,
point.
yeah,
Like Darrow was predominantly in Dark Horse Comics. Hard Boiled. Did he do Rusty and the Big Robot? You know, the
he
boy
did
robot.
the two properties co-created with Frank Miller.
Right.
You just said Hard Boiled and Rusty and I forget the name of his Big Robot or
Yeah.
whatever. And then he recently, the last decade, has been doing this Shaolin
Alan
character,
Cowboy. That's right.
Shaolin Cowboy, and he's phenomenal. His attention to detail and
And again,
narrative
I think
and
we go.
choreography alone.
I think I have to, look at accessibility because I wasn't able to read Richard Corbin at a formative age. You know what I
Right,
mean? I was an adult
right,
before I had any access to Richard Corbin,
right.
the through Jim Hanley's universe with reprints from I don't think NBM did the reprints, but um,
Sure. I
there
think
and there
Dark
were
Horse is reprinting him now, I
right,
believe.
and Jose Villarrubia, I think, is recoloring them or has
Yes.
recolored them.
And then he had a resurgence. He when Axel Alonso hired him to draw Banner,
Cage,
the Hulk miniseries, and Cage. And then I
I think he did
don't
a
know if he
solo
did.
as well for
He
DC
might
for
have done a
Montreal.
solo, and I think he did a few comics here and there, and he was always doing. And the thing is, when I think of Richard Corbin, he's the guy that maybe is versus Michael Golden in terms of originality and
That's
drawing in a style in a way that it's almost incomprehensible, like the way they understand light and how they shade their art.
I think I think Richard Corbin is inimitable. I don't think anyone draws like him. I don't think anybody could. I don't think
Agreed.
there's any clones of him. I don't think anybody has ever
Right.
looked at his style and he might have looked at Basil Wolverton and said, I could do
Sure.
that, but this, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I
Right.
don't think it's in the same.
It's
I don't,
testicular.
I don't yeah. I don't think this is a replacement versus, for him, but it's in the same idea that I kind of hold Frank Quietly in, um,
Hmm.
where Frank Quietly doesn't look like anybody else and nobody else. There's a couple of guys that could be uh, Frank Quietly adjacent, but they don't
Hmm.
quite have it. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know that anybody draws like Richard Corbin or can draw like Richard Corbin. Um,
Right.
Darrow, I mean, we could, Darrow falls into the same kind of family tree as Michael Golden, just to 11, or
Art Adams.
Art Adams to 11, or Steve Scroce, like I think I'd have to say Richard Corbin.
I think you're right. It's Corbin and Jeff Darrow is a sweetheart. Like
Oh my
I,
God,
I
yeah.
hung out with him last New York Comic Con. I hope to see him. And I think he lives in France now, and he's been super kind and told me how he's a fan of my art because he loved what I did on Bored to Death. And I'm
That's
like, get
amazing.
the fuck out of here. Are you crazy? The next one, and you'll see why. I'm throwing now a little weird softball. Bill Everett versus Carl Burgos. Bill Everett co-created Namor the Submariner.
Mhm.
Carl Burgos
The
co-created the
Torch,
Human Torch.
yeah, from Marvel
Uh,
Comics #1.
from Marvel Comics #1. Now, Carl Burgos, when you look at his art style, it's very of the time, very golden
Mhm.
age, very cartoony. Whereas Bill Everett, I think, had a little more rendering anatomy, finesse and acumen. Not that that means he's a better cartoonist, but might have been the better renderer. And if I'm correct, Bill Everett also co-created Daredevil.
Yep.
And so I think pedigree alone, and this could be a quick one.
Yeah, Bill
I'm
Everett
giving it to
probably.
Bill Everett.
Yeah, I think the thing we would have to. We can't get into anybody's mindset that's not around anymore. But he created in the golden age, and then he created something in the silver age. I don't think Carl
Mhm.
Burgos. I don't think we can say that about him.
Yeah,
I
I'd
think
have to
he's
look him
strictly
up.
golden age.
But yeah,
I could be
that's
wrong.
just yeah, those are knee-jerk reaction to that.
Sure.
This next one is hard. It's actually harder than you think. Because that's why I did the Bill Everett, Carl Burgos to get ready for this one. Neil Adams Can you do it? Can you figure it out?
No,
Versus Joe Kubert. And it's actually harder than you think. Because one
I
would think Neil Adams, right? Neil Adams, of course.
no,
Actually, I think it might be as much as Neil Adams introduced the way he did foreshortening alone
hmm,
and the weird like I would argue that maybe his layouts, his storytelling wasn't as good as one might think, but because his rendering was so good,
right.
he could get away with some of those layouts, if that makes sense.
I think
Joe Kubert's a master from minute one.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think
And I read more Neil Adams comics than Joe Kubert.
I've met both,
Yep, me too.
and
Yep.
both very generous, very kind. I have, and a lot of people can't say that about Neil, as much as, like his controversial takes on, science or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
I've never had a bad interaction with, Neil and I, like, I
Same.
didn't think he remembered me, and he would always call me by name and
Mm-hmm.
like just very kind. Joe Kubert I only met once during my signing for my Superman book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
amazing, amazing, both very, very kind. The thing about Neil is, I think I've always said that comics have two dads. Like comics artwork has two dads. One is Jack Kirby, and the other one's Neil Adams. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think like when you look at the comics of the time,
Mm-hmm.
both were doing revolutionary work.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can look at say a Mike Sikowski at DC doing kind of his, I wouldn't say his version of Kirby, but very simple, very like Justice League, like just plain figures. And then Neil comes in. Maybe Neil is better off with a Nick Fury, Steranko. Maybe that's a better field, but I think Steranko comes from the Kirby line of figures.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I think it's still Neil versus Jack, and then you have a Joe Kubert. My goodness.
I mean, Joe Kubert is in a weird way, uh, because maybe the comics he made, Sergeant Rock, The Losers, or what, the war comics he did, GI what I can't
War,
even tell you the titles. Tor. He also did graphic novels.
yeah.
Neil Adams did famous runs on Green Lantern, Green Arrow, famous runs on Batman
Hmm.
with writer Denny O'Neil on both of those. And like never and then he did interesting alternative independent comics like Miss Mystic, was that what it was called?
Oh, and he was doing his line, yeah, continuity comics.
Continuity and like beautiful rendering, like just unbelievable, like but Joe Kubert had a facility that is unmatchable.
I think my choice is Joe, and I'll tell you why. Um, I've never looked at a Joe Kubert comic and was able to figure out when he did it.
Mm,
What I mean is that his artwork never changed.
mm-hmm.
Never. Like it was consistent from first in the Golden Age to his last one in like
Kind of like John Buscema in that way.
yeah. And then when you look at Neil, you can see Neil doing a little too much. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe Neil needed to be reined in by an inker. I don't know. Not that it was bad. It's just that it was like his
Well,
last.
the difference between Joe and Neil is that I feel Joe Kubert was serving the story and Neil Adams was voguing like Madonna
Interesting.
in a way.
Yeah,
Like doing a panel that didn't have to look that way, but you couldn't not look at it because it was amazing,
but like if you look at the Sergeant Rock story that Joe did with Brian Azzarello, and then you look at Batman Odyssey, which was I think Neil's last work at DC. It might have been
No,
something.
his last work at DC, and then I think his last work at Marvel was a Fantastic Four series that Mark Waid at least
Right,
did the dialogue, if not wrote it. I don't remember.
right. I don't think like I just don't think it was classic Neil. I think it was just maybe Neil,
Right.
like as you're
But they're
saying.
getting older,
Yeah,
things
yeah,
get
yeah,
harder
yeah.
to do, of
But
course.
it's like Hubert's pencil never forgot. Do you know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
The only other thing I can compare it to is Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. He's like in his 80s now, he can still play. It's like the devil's in his fingers. You know what I mean? Like it's like, how do your fingers not forget or get or and it's almost like he's in pain unless he's playing guitar.
Right.
You know, the
Interesting.
same thing with Joe. I think like when he had a pencil in his hand, he was always on. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I
Yep.
see Joe.
No, I think I'm with Joe too. And that's the more mature adult Dean Hasfield picking that. This next one is, I think, super interesting, and maybe I'm wrong, but I keep saying that. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez,
Okay.
who could have been again versus a Neil Adams or a Joe Kubert, but I
Or,
have
or
him
you could have put him against George Perez, or you could have put him against
exactly. But
John.
I put him versus Dave Gibbons. They both can render the hell out of anything they want to draw.
It's not
There's
even
nothing.
that. It's their clarity of storytelling.
Their clarity of storytelling.
Like they can both just tell a story with minimal, you know, like yes, they can
And
overrender, but the minimalism that they can use to tell a story is genius level.
with
Like
such confidence, with such
yeah, you don't get
confidence.
that. You
And
don't get that.
they're not like slapping you in the face with it either,
Mm-mm.
you know? I cannot. I have the only reason why maybe Dave Gibbons would win this is, and I love Jose, and I see him every time I go to Baltimore,
Yeah.
or and we joke around, and Dave Gibbons I've hung out with, and he's great, and he keeps reminding me, or I remind him that he should play a hitman in a Guy Ritchie movie because he looks like that kind of an
Absolutely.
actor, you know. But I would think that as the many great comics that Jose Luis Garcia Lopez has drawn for DC, as well as was the designer of a lot of the characters for many years, what they look like.
Yeah, the house style.
He doesn't have a Watchman. He doesn't have the kind of stories that you can still remember Dave Gibbons drew.
The only thing that Jose has is Atari Force, and I think um, that doesn't speak as well as say a Watchmen or an Originals for
Right.
Gibbons
Right.
or anything. And my sentimental pick would be Garcia Lopez because
Sure.
Sadie was not even a year old, and we were at New York Comic Con. We were going to get our car, and I had to go to a garage to talk to the guy to get my car. And I look behind me, and there's Jose Garcia Lopez with his wife playing with Sadie in her stroller. And I mean that, and I've never talked to him about it, you know. And like one of these days, I might bring it up, you know, not that he'll remember, but just you know, like his kindness to me, like just like why else, you know? And yet, I shared a drink with Dave Gibbons, and I felt like weirdly enough, you know, like I felt like I knew him forever, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, you know, if I'm being sentimental, but I think like you're saying, there's no, unfortunately,
he did Twilight with Chaykin.
that's the one I was
Garcia
thinking of
Lopez.
just now.
But that might be as close to his Watchmen,
Yeah,
you know. And that's a great. I mean, I need to reread that. Like,
I was
ahead of its time when it came out. You know,
literally just looking at it on Amazon about a month ago.
right.
Like just like, oh, I need to you know, and it's such a crazy premise. Thank you, Howard. You know, like it, but it's not Watchmen. None of it's Watchmen.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Watchmen, as much as you want to say is Alan Moore, it's just as much Dave Gibbons.
Absolutely. I would say it's more.
Yeah.
Because he had to draw that
Yeah.
and add more narrative in the art. Like he is
Yeah.
a co-writer, you know?
So I'd say Dave Gibbons
Yep.
with
All right.
with a knife in my heart.
Exactly. Agreed. All right. This one. And I could not figure it out until I went, oh, that might be the one.
Let's do two more.
All right, we'll do two more.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to do four more, but let's see how quick we go. Okay. Bill Sienkiewicz versus Kyle Baker.
Well, let's give context.
It seems to be an easy answer until you start thinking about it.
No, it's not easy. God.
So Bill Sienkiewicz, has his Watchmen. It's called Electro Assassin. It's
Yeah.
called Daredevil Love and War, and those are written by Frank Miller.
Oh my God. And you can
He
even
did
throw his New Mutants run in there
New
as
Mutants,
Moon
Moon
Knight.
Knight, where you watched him grow into Bill Sienkiewicz on
Yeah.
Moon Knight,
Yeah,
because he
absolutely.
was kind of like a Neil Adams acolyte until he did jazz on the
Yeah.
page,
Yeah.
um and Straight Toasters, he introduced a lot more like Bob Peak painting style, and other fine art kind of things that he introduced to the comics world. um he does have books that will always recommend him, and
Mhm.
he inked Sal Buscema, he inked John Buscema on like Wolverine comics. And then we got Kyle Baker, who did they both worked on The Shadow
Yes.
with
With
Andy
Andy Helfer
Helfer
too, I think, right?
as the writer. And they both brought their A games and vogued and had fun. Kyle Baker, and I know the both of them. I was a
Mhm.
Bill's assistant in 1985 on New Mutants and Electro Assassin. I've known Kyle Baker forever. I saw him a few weeks ago at Terrificon and
Mhm.
talked to him for a while. But and Kyle Baker did Why I Hate Saturn, the Cowboy Wally
Cowboy
show.
Wallet Show.
And he did I Die at Midnight or something like that.
He
And
also
he's done
did The Truth, the
oh
Captain America story.
Captain America, the Black Captain America story. And he's done tons of great content. Plastic Man, he did a whole run on
Mhm.
Plastic Man. They're both, when they render, even though their styles are different, it's unbelievable. Like Kyle Baker is more the Looney Tune kind of
Yeah.
rendering style, but he can draw the hell out of anything.
Yeah.
Whereas Bill Sienkiewicz can dip his elbow in like a puddle of dirty water and create a masterpiece.
I would think that if I were to, I don't know how easy it would be. It'd be a very interesting test. If you put 7 pieces, just regular pieces of art of each other, seven each of each other, and you go, who's this? And you go, who's
Mhm.
this? And you go, who's this? I think I would be able to say Kyle Baker, Kyle Baker, Kyle Baker, but I think I would miss maybe half, maybe less than half on the Bill Sienkiewicz. And I don't know if that's because his styles can vary from project to project, or if Kyle's more consistent in his art. Um, I, that's a tough.
Here's using what you just said. I think you might be right. It might be easier to spot a Kyle Baker drawing, but Kyle Baker also is famously lazy, and taught me the lesson to make sure one panel on the page looks really good, uh, and you can get away with the rest of it. And that is kind of the shorthand of comics. Whereas Bill Sienkiewicz, who also famously did like a Jimi Hendrix graphic novel,
Mhm.
and actually worked with Joyce Bravner on a political comic, um, he flexes and he creates styles for the job.
Yeah,
He's more versatile. So,
he's a chameleon.
and in a way, and I said this once before, because he has only drawn so many comics in terms of narrative, interior
Mhm.
art. I once dubbed him that he was our Jim Steranko,
Mm, that's
whereas John
interesting.
Byrne was our Jack Kirby.
Mhm.
And I just meant that in terms of style, like to breaking and bringing in a very distinct style to comics,
And that's not to even include his inking, like on other
That
artists.
right doesn't even include that.
No,
So I think I have to lean toward Bill Sienkiewicz.
I would agree. I absolutely agree. And
Uh,
that is an agreement that isn't easy to come to. Like that's a
no,
tough one.
yeah. Can we do? I want to end in two more, and
Okay.
then I have a good beginning for next week.
Okay.
All right. This is Sam Keith versus Simon Bisley.
Simon Bisley, mostly known for his kind of 2000 AD work, right?
Well, and Lobo, the
And
Lobo
Lobo. Yeah.
miniseries,
Yeah.
and he has a very, uh, he's a acolyte of a Bill Sienkiewicz in some way.
I can see that. And
or
then
like
and Sam
in
Keith
terms of rendering style, and Sam Keith the same thing. Like, and in fact, I was never really a Sam Keith fan until I saw uh he did like a Marvel Comics Presents Wolverine
yes.
story with Peter David that would recommend him as the art style that he does. In fact, he drew the cover to the Verdict #4 in the late 80s
If
for my comic.
if it weren't such a overwhelming, like we both would go one way without even thinking, you'd
Mhm.
almost say Sam Keith versus a Mike Mignola, and it's only because of their unique individual styles. You know
Right,
what I mean? Like and you could also see like a Hellboy and the Max together, like
right.
put them together, like it really informs the reader. And
Yeah, Sam Keith is best known for the Max, which I believe was also turned to a cartoon.
yes, on MTV.
Right, on
But
MTV. Where Simon Bisley has drawn miniseries here and there. I don't think he's ever done a regular series
mm-mm.
necessarily.
I mean
But if I
Bisley,
had to choose between the two, I'm going with Simon Bisley.
I'm going the other way.
Okay.
And I feel like there's less Sam Keith out there, but I feel like the less that there is speaks volumes.
Oh,
I can't, I can't, I
I
feel
feel
like I
you.
can't pick a definitive Simon Bisley
Right,
piece.
right.
But Sam Keith, I could say the Max, and I think that's the one. You could also say Simon Bisley versus like a Liam Sharp, um, but
Oh, that is good.
maybe.
That is
But
good.
again, like if Sam Keith is going up against Mignola, I think it's easily Mignola. But Sam
That's
Keith, in this
interesting.
respect, I think Sam Keith wins.
Okay.
My
Okay.
vote.
All right. Do we do one more?
Yeah, good. We're gonna,
All right. Here we go. And this was so hard.
hmm,
I could not figure it out. I went, maybe this is the combo. David Mazzucchelli
hmm.
versus Paolo Rivera. And
I don't know if they're like relatable or
well,
comparable.
that's why it was hard because what I was doing was obviously
I see it.
Mazzucchelli,
Don't get me wrong. I see the
well, also
comparison.
because like Rivera is, they both construct their comics very purposely. Like
Mhm,
they truly think about layout,
mhm.
the black and white of the art.
Yeah,
They both can render the hell out of anything they want.
sure.
They're masters of storytelling and rendering and comic book pages.
Both did
And
Daredevil.
and they both did Daredevil.
Daredevil.
But Mazzucchelli also famous, he does books that continue to give him royalty checks, right?
Yeah,
Between Batman Year One, Daredevil Born Again, and I wouldn't say Rubber Blanket, but Rubber Blanket was an amazing departure that Paulo Rivera has not made.
right.
So
Also,
I'm
Asterios Polyp, which is
Asterios Polyp,
the craziest book you'll ever read.
right?
It does not, like visually, when you flip through the pages, it does not make sense. But my God, like that, like I finished reading that book when it came out, and I was just like, how does he do it? Like I couldn't, I can't even describe it accurately to anybody. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like I couldn't, like, oh, what do you like? What do you like about this book? Like
Hmm.
it's literally like it dumbfounds me.
Hmm.
I
And
would,
then and that's why it was hard to pick somebody because I could not figure out who to versus. And then I just thought, well, Paulo Rivera, the Daredevil connection, but also the fact that he really is like stylistically different, but as good
hmm,
in a lot of ways as David Mazzucchelli, but then never made that other leap
right.
that Mazzucchelli
I
did, which is
mean,
why I think Mazzucchelli clearly wins.
yeah, I think Paolo, because of even though not all of his work is painted, I think because of the fact that his painted work informs him, informs the reader of him, you could
Mhm.
put him up against an Alex Ross or an Adam Hughes even.
Right.
But I think in this respect, I think it is Mazzucchelli, only because I feel like in the same way that Dave Gibbons created, almost recreated comics visual language
Hmm.
in Watchmen, I think Mazzucchelli does that in his work, not just Batman, not just Daredevil, but Rubber Blanket and Asterios Pulp. And he's a teacher, so I mean, yeah, it makes
Yep.
sense.
Yep.
But I think he reinvented visual shorthand and visual communication in a sense.
Yep. Well, and again, that wasn't an easy one. And if anybody can think of a better verses, I know we've already probably mentioned other artists that would have been the better verses, but because I use them and that's part of my own rules, I can't reuse them, unless we decide, that doesn't work, try something else, different combinations. So I think we got through the same amount as we did last time. So we actually made it over to page 2
I
out of 5.
I can't wait till we finish this exercise in episode 52, which is like
I know.
a year.
I know. It's crazy.
Anyway.
All right, man. Well, anything else? I think that's it.
Again, thank you everyone for commenting on our videos. As I was telling Dean earlier this week, I will be I will be uploading the missing episodes on Spotify. It just took a while because my computer, as you know, was down, and these are all been tests, that we've been pushing, my computer to do the video podcast. But the Spotify version of our podcast will be updated very shortly. Thank you if you listen as well as watch. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your comments and your recommendations. Gaz and Tim, thank you, Club Domingo, for mentioning us. Again, we are very thankful. We got to have Gaz on one of these days. He's on the other side of the world. It's so hard to figure out what, and he's like, I'll do it whenever, I'll do it on your time. It's like, get out, man. But yeah, we'll have him on one of these days. Dean, thank you very much, as always.
Thank you, Vito.
And happy anniversary to my lovely wife. 16 years. Let's go for 16 more, I guess.
Yeah,
not more.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Good night, everybody. Yay, yay.
Yay, yay.
And that's how we end it. Good night.